Hello, I am David Caldecott, and this is my novel Time Not Here. We are on chapter 24. I've been reading it from start to finish and posting it on YouTube. This chapter is a tough one, so apologies in advance. It contains some pretty difficult things, and if you've been following the story up to this point, it's probably going to make you a little bit mad. Chapter 24. Daniel returns to York and gets back to work, invigorated by the time spent with such a beautiful young woman. With less than a week before his flight to France, he'd sold most of the remaining furnishings in the house, holding on to the ginger throne for its personal significance, and making plans to hire a small van to take it to his parents' house for safekeeping. The cat had been sold to a young builder in the north of York for a small cash amount, more to filter out unsavory types than any need for the money. Given how devious and deceitful his first owner had been, this cat deserved a good home, and this builder will take good care of him, Daniel decided in the end. He puts on some music and sits on the empty floor. What a year I've had. Suddenly, he jolts up with unexplainable speed. He didn't know why, but he felt the strongest urge to go to the front door and look at the wall beside it. He sees a small wall hanging. There, since he had moved in, he had never paid any attention to it. It's a framed page of parchment paper, embossed with a poem. He takes the frame off the wall and sits on the floor to read it. He recognizes the name of the writer, Rudyard Kipling. It must have been hung by Lathe. The house was empty when they'd moved in. Odd, he thinks, for a psychopath to enjoy poetry. He starts reading. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. He falls back on the floor, staring at the ceiling as his vision blurs. What's happening? Why had I been compelled to find the poem? Why had Lathe hung it there in the first place? Was it another mind game by a sociopath, or is there something missing? He remembers Magda told the group that Kimber continues to be in your system for weeks or months after the ceremony. He takes a few deep breaths, closes his eyes and asks, was Lathe really a psychopath? In an instant, he's hallucinating, as if he'd just ingested a huge dose of the Kimber bark, full color, vivid images flashing in the darkness of his closed eyelids. The images are familiar. He must have seen this before, during the ceremony, and blocked it out of his mind. Perhaps he hadn't been ready. He sees his friendship with Lathe play out before his eyes. Their first meeting in the restaurant, their first philosophical debates, Lathe talking about masculinity in a way that made Daniel feel uncomfortable. About history, about how important it is to understand where we come from, the mistakes of the past we must avoid in the present. Daniel had ignored him, changing the topic to physics or something else he deemed more interesting. Lathe's painful childhood and abusive mother, how he couldn't respect his father for allowing that to happen, how he had had to learn to cope in whatever ways he could, that sometimes those coping mechanisms were used on people that don't deserve it. He opens his eyes and takes a few deep breaths, noticing his pounding heart and sweaty palms. There's more to Lathe than just labeling him a psychopath, but what about all those lies, all that fake acting, the knives and the axe and the balaclava? He closes his eyes again, tells himself that he will see whatever there is to see. He's taking a pull on a cigarette, sat in the ginger throne, looking across the conservatory at Lathe, busy talking about things he wanted to do to decorate the new house. Lathe suggests they have different themes in different rooms, one medieval, another Arabic, in honor of Daniel's childhood. Lathe picks up a small, sharp knife and pokes it into the end of a cigarette that he'd rolled. Daniel relives the shattering fear. His body seizes up, his mind takes over. Is he in danger? He runs out the door and disappears into the rain. His field of view pops out of the back of his own head, watching his former self running in his wet pajamas. The scene rewinds to the start. He moves to the other side of the room, draws in close to the back of Lathe's head. He passes through the skull. He opens his eyes. The high is overpowering. The walls vibrate. He's relaxed, comfortable. He can hear Lathe's thoughts. Damn it. Well, Lathe, you managed to mess that cigarette up. I'm such a bad roller. Daniel's better. I should ask him to roll for me more often. No, I can learn. I'll get better. Do I really want to get better? I thought I was going to quit anyway. Okay, look, enough chatter, Mr. Brain. Let's resolve this. He looks around, sees the knife. He had used it to screw in a loose bolt on the coffee table. He hadn't unpacked his toolkit yet. The knife worked well enough. Good thing I brought that knife in earlier. It's got that pointy end. I can use it to push the scraggly tobacco back into the end of the cigarette. I can salvage this. He picks up the knife and looks at Daniel. The effects of the weed are kicking in. He wonders why Daniel always gets a bit weird when he's high, going quiet and second-guessing himself. The kid is young, though. He reminds himself of the true value of friendship, to help your buddy to become a better man. It might take time, but Daniel will figure out this stuff sooner or later. In the meantime, let's just leave him to his high for a minute and sort out this damned cigarette. What are you doing? Ha, he thinks. Well, I'm trying to right the wrong of this bloody cigarette, but let's keep the mood light here, Lathe. Let's make a joke out of it, to keep you from getting angry at yourself like you used to do, yeah? Trying to right a wrong. Perfect, he laughs to himself. Daniel will ask what I mean, and we can have a good giggle about it. He hears Daniel's breath from across the room, growing faster and faster. Why is he getting all worked up? It was just a joke. What's going on with him? He looks up. Just before he says, "Are you okay, mate?" Daniel stands, declares that he's tired and has to go to bed. Stay a little longer. We're just getting started, he pleads. He doesn't want to be high alone. Daniel scurries out of the room, kicks the door frame as he passes through. He's white as a sheet. Look, he's been through a lot, Lathe tells himself. That house he was in down in London was awful. His housemates took coke and held late-night orgies all the time. It's understandable that he's a bit on edge. He'll be all right. He'll get better. I just need to be a good friend and help him adjust back to life here. Maybe I'll cook for him tomorrow. I'll pick up some wine. But first, let's finish this. He refocuses, finally fixes the cigarette, lights it, and sits back. Dan really did find a great house. It might be a bit run down, but the location is central and the space we have to play with is massive. This is the best place I've lived in years. I just need to get myself a job that isn't too soul-destroying, then figure out what I want to do. Maybe I'll finally get serious about doing stand-up comedy. York is a decent place for that. I can figure this out later. Daniel's a great guy to bounce ideas off. He'll help me zero in on my direction. For now, let's just enjoy this summer day in a warm conservatory and a comfortable sofa. Daniel sits up in silence, looking over to the poem and those first two harrowing lines, losing their head and blaming it on you. He had been looking for excuses to distrust Lathe, super attentive to every movement and phrase uttered, filtering it all through a "is he a psychopath?" lens. Avoiding Lathe at every opportunity, getting uncomfortable every time their paths did cross. Lathe struggled to understand, desperately trying to rekindle the friendship with offers of food, wine, girl-chasing, or board games. Every single offer was refused with a measly excuse like, "I'm tired," or "maybe another time." Every joke met with a blank stare. Lathe had been living with a ghost, a shadow of a man. Lathe had gone to great lengths to be there for him, to help Daniel grow as a man and accomplish his dreams. Daniel's appreciation of his friendship was fading with each week. The bastard even claimed that he was the one who'd done so much for Lathe. Daniel never uprooted his life to help Lathe start a business. Daniel didn't give countless hours of his own time talking through Lathe's problems. Daniel never even said thank you. Lathe knew that he wasn't perfect himself. He had struggled with his weed consumption. He'd occasionally succumbed to depression and whiskey. He had made some bad financial decisions that hung like a ball and chain around his neck. Getting credit was impossible. He had to depend on the kindness of friends for help. Daniel had made plenty of the same mistakes, though. He had his own bouquet of financial mishaps, relationship disasters, and abandoned jobs. He always spoke as if he was better than Lathe, which he may well have been, but Lathe hoped that one day, when all his egomania had been overcome, that he might just notice how much Lathe had been there for him. Lathe knew he'd have his chance to repay Daniel for the money he'd spent, dragging him along for the ride. The two of them together were more powerful than either on their own. That much he knew. If Lathe was going to make a success of himself, he had a better chance with his best friend by his side. But where had that friend gone? He had disappeared after that strange night with the broken cigarette, on edge ever since. It was a wonder that Lathe hadn't exploded with anger, the cruelty of being ignored in his own home by the man who had claimed to be his brother in arms. His patience and hope that Daniel would come around kept him from saying something he'd regret. When his temper did take over, it didn't seem to do anything but produce more blank expressions from Daniel, claims that nothing was wrong, that he was just tired from work. Daniel experiences the frustration, the hopelessness, the descent into depression, and the final decision to leave that Lathe went through. All the result of what he had done. He relives their last night together, feels the sliver of hope in Lathe's heart that maybe, just maybe, Daniel would come back to him. He had listened to Daniel's podcasts, left one playing, hoped he'd see that he needed their friendship. He even confessed to Daniel that he'd struggled to hold power over his own demons, hoping that Dan would reciprocate and reveal something, anything. It seemed to be going well. He wanted to tell Daniel that he was leaving all his camping gear for him. He couldn't take an axe on the plane, after all. Dan might have a use for them if he goes camping again. Daniel stood and declared he was hungry, went downstairs, closed the front door behind him, and never came back. Destroyed. All those years of friendship, all those 3-hour phone calls discussing politics, ethics, and how their lives were going. Moments shared, fun had, challenges overcome. Relics of a friendship in ruins. Lost to some unknown disaster in Daniel's head, erased by paranoia. He punches the wall, the injustice. The bottle of whiskey is empty. He slams the door on this chapter of his wretched life, vomiting into the toilet. Let the bastard flush. Daniel wakes the next morning, still on the living room floor, having fallen asleep with the framed poem at his side. His mind had been so powerful, so fearful, and fucking intelligent that it not only fooled him into believing his best friend was a psychopath, it convinced everyone. Even Sam, the skeptical and scientifically minded rationalist, seduced by the theatrical descriptions that Daniel delivered, the elaborate narrative that kept him from accepting the truth. He remembers the fear he had felt a few days before, that Serenity might be playing a prank on him. Had he given those thoughts the chance, they might have flowered into delusion as quickly and intensely as his perceptions of Lathe had. He had made a choice about Serenity, to separate himself from the anxious thoughts of the mind, to remember the control panel from his visions, to say next, to thank the fears for being there and recognizing the possibilities ahead of him, but letting them go and returning to the unmistakable reality of the present moment. He hadn't made that choice with Lathe, not at all. He had seen the hints of manipulative reptilian behavior underlying Lathe's persona and taken them as his sole focus point. He had made it more real than it was. He let it define him when he should have just seen it, acknowledged it, and then come back to the moment. He would have seen that the knife was just a tool for fixing the broken cigarette, the axe a gift from the camping enthusiast, The weed an escape from a neglectful friend. After a shower, a shave, and a short meditation, he sits in the ginger throne and takes out his journal. Rereads the entries he'd made during the height of his paranoia, aghast at how obsessive he had been. Every word Lath spoke was meticulously analyzed for manipulative malice. The man was manipulative, yes. He most likely lied about the mugging and most definitely put on a performance to get what he wanted. But was he a murderer? Was he a fully-fledged psychopath? Or just another damaged human being, trying to pull themselves together? In either case, Daniel had been in the wrong. His pulling away and overconsumption of fear had brought out Lath's worst character traits. He had been creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. He had turned Lath into a monster. He could have loved his friend enough to forgive him for his dark side. He could have blocked the manipulation attempts with peace instead of anger. He could have put up boundaries and stood firm in them. Instead, he had stood there in silence, judging. Fuck. Okay, only 2 more chapters to go. There's not much to say anymore. Let's just keep going.